Okay, it's recording.
Excellent. Welcome everyone to our webinar, The Finger Lakes Meat Project, the Meat Locker and MEATSUITE. My name is Lauren Gwynn. I'm the director of the Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network, based here at Oregon State University. I'm your host today, along with our program manager, Catherine Quambeck. We do webinars on topics related to small-scale meat processing and the farmers and ranchers who raise meat for local and other niche markets. If you'd like to be on our email list, please sign up at our website, which is www.nichemeatprocessing.org. It's right there on the introduction slide. If you have webinar topic suggestions, please feel free to email us. Catherine will write her email address or the MPAN email address into the chat box, which is down at your lower right. Today we're using a new system called WebEx instead of our old Adobe Connect, so bear with us through any minor technical difficulties, but we've been working on this to make it go as smoothly as possible. MPAN, for those of you who don't know us, is a network of processors, farmers, ranchers, universities, public agencies, nonprofits, and others, and our mission is to support small and very small meat processors who are essential partners in bringing local and sustainable meat and poultry to market. We are also part of E-Extension, which is an initiative of the National Land-Grant University System. And Catherine has some technical things to tell you about before we get started.
Yeah, so just so everyone can see the chat box, because that's where we're going to have you ask questions. It's in the lower right-hand side of your screen. If for some reason you're not seeing it, up at the upper right, there's a speech bubble that says chat below it. Click on that, and that will make the chat window visible. Please ask your questions via the chat box. We're not going to have questions come in over the phone, so please mute your phone. If you're listening via the computer audio, you can mute that as well, and ask questions using the chat system.
Great, thank you very much. So to go over our agenda today, the Finger Lakes Meat Project is a regional initiative in New York State to grow the freezer trade. And by freezer trade, we mean the sales of meat in bulk quantities, such as whole, half, and quarter animals, which, of course, is a long-standing traditional way for people to buy meat. And that the project really is aimed at benefiting livestock farmers and consumers. It consists of educational efforts, an online directory of farms called the MEATSUITE, and 2 community freezers in central New York called the Meat Locker. Today, we're going to hear more about this project, how it got started, and its value to local farms. If you are interested in starting a similar project in your region, please be sure to fill out our extremely brief survey so that we know how to follow up with you. And we will put the link to that survey in the chat box now and at the end of the webinar. And if somehow you miss it, you can always follow up with us afterwards and say, yes, I want one. How do I work with you to figure this out? It won't be easy. It's not an out-of-the-box kind of thing, as you will see, but we are going to work with Matt to see how this can be expanded in different parts of the country. So we are going to be hearing from Matt LaRue, our great colleague, who is an agricultural marketing specialist with Cornell University Co-op Extension. He works with farmers on business development, direct and wholesale marketing, market channel selection, and cost analysis, marketing and processing regulations, and agritourism. And he is the brains and energy behind the Finger Lakes Meat Project. So please, Matt, educate us.
All right, thanks. I'm really excited and pleased to do this through MPAN, and I'm also on the advisory board for MPAN, so I'm pleased to see this kind of programming coming to our webinars. And yeah, I'm just going to give you the lowdown on the project thus far, tell you everything that I know, and I'm just trying to get someone's videos popped up, so it was distracting. Sarah Baker, you have your camera on. Just FYI. Okay, so I'm going to give you the overview and tell you everything that we've experienced thus far and what we were trying to accomplish when we started this and so on. So thank you to MPAN for the chance to do this. And I didn't give a slide to introducing myself, but I'll just tell you that I work with Cornell Cooperative Extension. I'm a county ag agent here in Tompkins County, which is where Cornell University is and the city of Ithaca is. Prior to working with Extension and going for a master's in food marketing at Cornell, I did work with the New England Livestock Alliance and the New England Heritage Breeds Conservancy where I got some work developing some small brands that we had in New England. So here we go, Finger Lakes Meat Project, and the project consists of a few main pieces, which I'll expand on in a moment, but we do run, we're most known for the meat lockers, which are rentable freezer space, and the MEATSUITE.com, which is a simple web directory for consumers to find farmers on. And so the reasons that we got started growing the freezer trade is that I do a project called Market Channel Assessment with vegetable growers, where we do some light level 1 week of data collection on the farms, and we try to assess the relative performance of the different marketing channels they're using, channels being things like farmers markets, CSAs, sales to restaurants and grocery stores, and so on. And we assess for those farms which channels are the best, which ones are the weakest, and we can suggest ways to expand their participation in a top-performing channel and ways to possibly improve a poor-performing channel or maybe even to eliminate it. And while I was doing that work with vegetable farmers, I was starting to get approached by livestock farmers who said they really needed the same kind of assessment. But the nature of the product was so different that I couldn't go at it that way. But I did do some case studies with small farms, and it led me to conclude that the freezer trade really was the best way for these farms to sell, and that's why we got into trying to expand it. So that's some brief background about market channel assessment and how it influenced this project. When we started the project, my colleague had also done an assessment of where the local foods in our region, in our county, were coming from, and she came up with 20% of the vegetables eaten in our county come from local sources, and that is really high nationally. And Ithaca is well known for having a very vigorous and well-developed local food scene, but it has really always been centered on fresh fruits and vegetables. And then there was sort of a second wave of local meat. But during the same period in 2013, we estimated that less than 2% of the beef in the county was coming from local sources, and that beef was still the most consumed meat among local farms, or among local consumers. So obviously there's tremendous room for growing the local meat scene, even in a well-developed local food system like this one. So
Matt, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. I think we've got a little bit of bad sound quality. Are you on a speakerphone?
I'm not. I'm on a headset to the web.
Oh, that sounds clearer right there. So don't move.
I moved it closer to I moved the microphone a little bit closer.
Thank you.
Sure. And so when I was starting this work, and I partnered on all of my Finger Lakes Meat Project work with an ag agent in a neighboring county called Steuben County. So we got some funding from SARE, and we passed out 200 surveys to consumers and asked them, in very simple terms, why don't you buy local meat? And then why don't you buy locally raised meat specifically in bulk? Like, are you buying quarters and halves? And if not, why not? And what we heard from the 200 surveys was that, of course, the consumer perceives local meat to have a high price, and of course it does have a high price, when you're shopping in direct channels like local food stores and farmers markets. And then they also cited that it was relatively hard to find, it had limited availability, and that can be reflected in a statement about convenience. At the same time, we surveyed 40 producers in our region, and we asked them the same question, are you selling meat in bulk quantities? And if you are or if you aren't, why not, and why not more? And what we heard back from them is that the customer kind of lacks the knowledge about how to buy meat in bulk. Things like looking at the different weights and the pricing and the dressing percentages, and then understanding what they're going to receive when they get a quarter or a half and how to use all the cuts and so on. So customer knowledge was a big barrier on the producer side. And then also access to processing. So a lot of farms were thinking about the need for USDA-inspected processing, but there is a provision in New York State and in many other states that if the animal is sold before the kill date, in other words, if it's still alive when it's sold in quarters and halves, or even down to 16ths and so on, then it can go through a custom non-USDA inspected processor. And this was key, again, in our region because producers were starting to cite that they couldn't do certain forms of marketing because of the limited access to USDA inspected facilities, of which there are still several around us. But there are 5 times more custom processors who are not inspected. So there's actually a lot of processing capacity in our region, especially if we focus on bulk sales. And then both groups, the consumers and the producers, cited that the customer does not have the ability to store meat. In other words, farmers were hearing back from consumers, oh, I'd love to buy that way, but I can't store it. And of course, consumers told us that they would like to buy that way when we told them that there was a savings, but again, that they couldn't store that much meat. And then again, both groups cited the difficulty in finding each other. Even though we have a lot of farmers markets in the region, consumers said that they did not know how to find a farmer that was selling meat in bulk quantities, and specifically even raising an animal in, to their preference. And then the producers said that they would like to sell more in bulk, but they had trouble finding new customers. Things like putting an ad on Craigslist weren't really effective, and they couldn't find new customers. So we had some ideas in mind when we started the project, but we also took these barriers from our surveys and tried to develop solutions, and that's a lot of what led to the 2 biggest components being the website and the freezers. As I mentioned before, with my introduction about marketing channel assessment, when I worked on these case studies with some farms, we really did find that freezer trade sort of offers a sweet spot and sort of a hybrid between wholesaling live animals, even through conventional market type style, and direct marketing, but not as labor intensive as farmers markets. So it is the best channel for the farmer in the sense of premium pricing is still available. You don't take on inventory management. You don't take on storage. The sales time per quarter or half can be relatively small. So it had all these sort of hybrid benefits of both wholesale and direct market channels. And then on the consumer side, I just understood the benefit for the consumer because this is how I buy meat at home, and this is how, as Lauren said in the introduction, people have been buying meat this way for a long, long time, and the benefit of bulk buying is sort of the savings that you get. So we saw this channel as this unique opportunity that doesn't happen often in local foods, where the product is actually more affordable than even grocery store products in some cases, and it still supports premium pricing and farm viability. So we really, between the survey and our own research, we're very excited about trying to grow the freezer trade and really to grow local meat sales in our region as a sum. So that said, the Finger Lakes Meat Project consists of 4 main components. We do consumer educational events. We have classes that are called How to Buy Local Meat classes. We don't have a fancy title for that one, but we do educate the consumer about some of the basics of raising livestock and feeds and so on, addressing some of the kind of claims that they see on packages like natural or organic, pasture raised, and so on. And then we teach them about the relative, yields from live weight to carcass weight to retail, and talk about how the pricing is influenced. It's typical for pricing to come in the format of dollars per pound hanging weight, so we orient the consumer to what that all means. We also do events like Locally Grown Food Festival over in our partner county, Steuben County, or here we just call it the Meat Fair, where we invite producers to come in, talk about their product, hand out brochures, talk to the consumer, and we offer sampling. So just, your basic local foods promotion. Then we have an online directory called the MEATSUITE, and that, thanks to some new funding from the New York Farm Viability Institute, we're offering that now in almost 30 counties in the state, and I suspect by the year end it'll probably be available all over the state. But it's a simple directory with contact information. The consumer can shop by species. They can look for their keywords that they prefer, again, like organic or pasture raised, and so on. And they can search by zip code. So it's a lot like other local foods directories. What makes it different is that it's specific to farms that are selling meat in bulk quantities, and we don't allow sales by the cut. This is just a place for the farmer and the consumer to meet over bulk purchases. Next, the thing that has captured the most headlines, if you will, and gotten a lot of attention is that we're bringing back the old concept of the meat locker. This is space that's rentable to consumers, and if they are living, let's say, in an apartment or some small housing, they don't want to give up the footprint for a large freezer, or if they're looking at the financial investment of buying the meat in bulk and buying a big chest freezer, and that seems like too much, they can rent space from us. And in Ithaca, we have a lot of apartment living. We have a lot of transient population, people that are coming or going with the university, and we thought it would be a good fit, but we also think it can work in many other communities. And then the new component that I hope I'll be talking more about in the coming year is that we're offering marketing training to producers on how to improve their marketing techniques when they're marketing to consumers, and also working with them to help them develop pricing that works for the farm and is, of course, profitable to the farm. So these are the four main components of the project, and I think from this point on, I'm really going to concentrate on the MEATSUITE and the meat locker. So this is what our homepage looks like for the Finger Lakes Meat Project. We are not web developers, so it's a very simple format. We're trying to orient the consumer to the reasons to buy bulk and how we can help them do that. And it has links to the Ithaca Meat Locker location, the Corning, New York locker, and then, of course, the MEATSUITE. I'll just take you through into the MEATSUITE. So this is what it looks like if you search for all farms selling beef, and it's showing 18 different farms. Of course, I didn't put in a zip code here, so I'm just getting all the results, but this gives you a sample of what the search will reveal. And you can see that we have certain claims played up in little gray highlighted boxes. Here we have grass-fed, no grain, pasture-raised, heritage breed, and then the blue starburst that you see there says accept payment plans. And we are trying to encourage farms to develop a way to accept payments from their consumers. So again, we can work at that affordability problem that it comes with laying out a bunch of cash when you buy in bulk. Then you can see all the species that are offered by a given farm, and there's quite a bit of diversity on the website as a whole. We even have tilapia from a local farm. We have rabbit, some different game birds, and so on. And if we just look at this example of obedient farms here, you can see they're offering lamb, chicken, pork, and beef. And then you can click further in to see a farm's profile. I'm going to hop forward onto that. So here's the profile. As an example, the farm writes their own description for overall for the farm. They upload a picture. They can log in and alter their profile anytime they like. The catch is that we extension are approving all listings, so we make sure that they have accurate and relevant claims and descriptions. We won't allow them to make claims that can't be supported. We also, don't allow any negative speak about other farms or about, the industry or the system or anything like that. We just try to keep it positive. It seems like maybe we have a question. Okay, so the question is, are we also looking at accepting SNAP for purchases? The way that we handle that, and we're rolling out more, thanks for asking, because that's a good question. The way that we're going to work it is right now, extension in our county, where our Ithaca Meat Locker is located, can accept EBT and reimburse the farm. So we are accepting, EBT payments that way. We don't have a real formalized system, and we don't have a system for all the counties using the website. However, it hasn't even actually come up yet, though of course that's what we have in mind when we try to accept payment plans and so on. In New York State, most counties, most farmers markets are equipped to accept SNAP, and there was even a grant program last year that gave individual farms iPhones that were capable of receiving SNAP benefits. So sometimes it's the farm that's enabled, sometimes it's the farmer's market that's enabled, and then in our case, it's our extension office that's enabled to accept those payments and facilitate with the producer. And we hope to see more usage because, like I said, we haven't seen any yet. The MEATSUITE's been up since 2012, and we have seen sales to the site, of course, but we haven't heard any reports of EBT usage. And I should point that out while we're looking at this profile. We're just serving as a directory here. So when we got started, and for any of you that are working for nonprofits or for extension, universities, and so on, when we got started, our insurance company had a problem with the site because they perceived that extension was involved in selling or owning or brokering meat, and of course we don't do that. We're just like another local foods directory. So the consumer can go search for farms. We don't endorse any farms over the other. And when they find a farm that sounds good to them, then they contact the farm directly, and you can see email and phone and so on here. We don't get involved in that. So it may be that sales have happened using EBT and we don't know about it, but I really don't know at this point. I guess it's a good moment for me to just quickly say that we are doing other work on the affordability front. We recently received a grant from a local group called the Great Local Foods Network, and we're going to be giving out mini grants to 10 qualifying families towards the purchase of meat. So they'll go and agree to buy bulk meat from a farm. We will pay a certain percentage of it, and we'll pay it directly to the farm, and then they'll just have to pay the balance. So that's just a short period experiment for us, but we're doing things like promoting EBT, promoting payment plans, and now the mini grants to families to try and encourage people to realize the affordability that's available with bulk meat. So that's the MEATSUITE in short, and I can take more questions about the MEATSUITE at the end. There's a few questions, so I think I'll just take a minute to read them. Yeah.
Hey, Matt, there's a couple I'll send you. We can pause here between MEATSUITE and Meat Locker. And
sure, go ahead.
Okay, here's one I just sent in. As a point-of-sale service, do you as a CES monitor correct use of label claims on profile sites?
Yeah, as I think I understand the question, yeah, when a farm submits a profile, it doesn't go live. Instead, I get an email notifying me, and then I go and review it. And the policing of claims is tricky business, and I don't have a written rule about it, but I generally just look if it seems reasonable, then I approve it. So I can give you some examples of claims that I have disapproved that might be easier. I had a farm send in a claim. They described their farm, their operation, and then they said, all of our beef is prime beef. There's no USDA grading in New York State, and they're definitely going through processing in New York State. So I didn't allow them to make a prime grade claim. I had a farm that was promoting rabbit meat as having fewer calories than other meat, and I didn't do the research, but I also didn't think it was an important claim to make. And when I emailed the farm, they couldn't give me, they couldn't cite a source for that information, so we removed that. It's so far with all the farms that we've ever dealt with, it's always come out through conversation, through email or phone call conversation, and it's worked out to be very reasonable. We don't see people trying to make false claims deliberately. They may they may have done them with innocent intent, and we correct them. But I hope that answers the question. But yeah, we just sort of review the description and adjust it. We tried to make our little highlighted boxes very clear. That's why the one that says grass-fed also says no grain, just to be really clear on that. And then the next question.
Oh, it said, what program/host are you all using for the directory?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. I don't know the world of web creation at all. We had an employee that was in-house that used something called Sonata to build it, and that person has since left the organization. And other web developers that I've tried to contract with say they're unfamiliar with Sonata. So, asking me about how to structure a web database and what to use, I really don't know.
Well, people have to find their local database expert.
That's right.
Well, so if there's any other questions related to the MEATSUITE portion, go ahead and send them in now. But again, we'll have time for questions at the end, too, so if you think of it as we're going.
All right, and someone did throw up there, can we talk about how the payment plan works, and do the consumers sign a contract? And the great thing about that question is that I don't get involved. So I don't get involved in payment plans. Individual farms have to create and manage their own payment plans, and completely independent of us. When we made this an option to advertise it on the profile, we heard from farms that they were already doing payment plans. And again, as extension and even as the Finger Lakes Meat Project, I don't want to get between a consumer and a farmer in their transaction. So I leave management of payment plans to the farm, and I don't know how they work. I would expect that, traditionally the person would be making payments to the farm before they receive their meat, but I really don't know the ins and outs of individual arrangements. And I prefer to stay out of it because it would be a tricky thing for extension to get in the middle of that. So if that's all the questions, I'll move forward into the Meat Locker. And like I say, that's the Meat Locker is what people are really excited about. We got great press when we opened the Ithaca Meat Locker. That was in April of 2014. And then we just opened the Corning, New York Meat Locker in September of 2015, and we got another giant wave of national press, including getting onto NPR's Morning Edition. I've always been excited about this project and this idea, but I never expected it to get that kind of attention. So these are pictures, just so you know what the Meat Locker looks like. It's really just a 10 by 14 walk-in freezer with shelving and then containers, and the consumer rents containers from us. I'll move on and explain more, but I wanted to give you a visual as I'm talking about the Meat Locker. The picture on the right is the very first person to take advantage of the Meat Locker. This woman had been buying lamb by the cut at the farmer's market. She proceeded to buy a whole lamb from the same farmer, and she said that when she did the math, she was saving over $200 by buying the whole lamb. And the funny thing is about that transaction is that farmer is a little bit distant and I'd say a little bit grumpy. And I was worried that he was going to be mad, about the influence that our project was having on his sales. But he said to the woman that he wished he could sell all his lamb this way. Of course, that's what we were hoping and that's what we anticipated. But it was nice to see it proved out with the very first person renting from us. There is a really neat history that I can't ignore. Of course, meat lockers and freezer lockers were common around the U.S., particularly in the 1940s. And, by the early 50s, they'd already died out because people got home freezers. But right here in Ithaca, where I'm based, there was a locker plant called Mother Zero. And it was started by Cornell University in cooperation with the state and trying to encourage people to use this downtown giant freezer coupled with a small freezer at home, which they were calling Baby Zero. And we're really promoting the very same thing several years later. And I really like the name, too, of Mother Zero. But, you know that the history of meat lockers around the U.S., there are still some around. But before grocery stores had fresh meat by the cut available whenever you wanted it, and before people had freezers in their homes, so again, mostly we're looking at the 1940s and earlier, it was common to have a big freezer plant downtown where you stored your frozen food. You stopped in, and like a safe deposit box, you would withdraw a little bit of your supply and bring it home for consumption. So we're really repeating history. So our meat lockers, again, there's one in Corning and one in Ithaca, New York, are 10 by 14 walk-in freezers. They have space for about 65 of these plastic containers, bins that we call them. And we offer two different sizes to consumers, an 18 and a 25-gallon bin. Here in Ithaca, we're charging $3 a month for the 18-gallon and $5 a month for the 25. Over in Corning, they have slightly higher pricing. And this pricing, I'll get into some of the economics later on, but it's artificially low, and it's deliberately a low price. The focus of our project is to get more consumers to buy meat from local farms in bulk quantities. So we wanted to make our prices for rent, artificially low, so that wasn't a barrier to the decision to buy local. We have grant money, and we'll continue to have to do grant writing and fundraising to keep the rents this low. However, again, we don't want the rent at the meat locker to be a reason that keeps people from buying. We really want to facilitate sales to people, so that's why our rents are like this. Then again, they will creep up a little bit through time. Our meat locker is open by appointment for drop-off, and then it's also open 3 hours a week. So let me step back for a minute. The Ithaca meat locker has been open for about a year and a half, and it's completely full. We have a short waiting list of people waiting to get in, but all of our containers are rented. And to serve those consumers, we're open for 3 hours a week. As well, we're open by appointment when people want to drop their meat off. So, in terms of anyone who's thinking about this idea, as it grows and as it develops, you can probably get yourself down to 3 hours a week, which has made a big difference for us because staff time is our most expensive input. When people drop meat off or take it out, we do a complete inventory and we make them sign for it. This is a way to assure them that their meat is secure and that we're not taking it. Especially for those new buyers who aren't used to buying meat in bulk, and we can all chuckle about the people who say they want their entire quarter cut into ribeye steaks, right? So we want them to, when their ribeye steaks are gone, to know that they ate them all, not us. So for that reason, we inventory everything when it comes in. We have them sign for it, and then as they take pieces out, piece by piece, we have them sign for it on the way out. We've also been collecting weights on all the cuts, and that's just for our own data-driven minds, because we want to see how these animals are getting cut up and what is sort of the typical yields for animals that are raised on direct marketing type farms and processed at small-scale processors. When we're not open, the freezer is locked and it has an alarm on it to monitor both the temperature and the door, and it will call my phone if there's a power outage, if the temperature gets too warm, or if someone tries to open the door. There's also a padlock on it. And I should point out that consumers never go inside the freezer. We will bring their container out of the freezer to them. They'll take out what they want. We just sort of put it up on a table for them, and then we put it back in the freezer. So we don't have people going in and out of the freezer. So right now, with the Ithaca freezer at capacity, it's actually more like 45 users renting over 60 bins. We have I showed you a nice, neat picture in the beginning of all the containers up on shelves, but we actually have additional containers, so there's some on the floor, and we can still work around that. We really are trying to use our space as best we can and accommodate as many people as possible so they can be buying meat from local farms. The contents of the meat locker represent 20 different farms, and some of those have been found, by by consumers shopping the MEATSUITE. Some of them, they found on their own. There's no necessity for a linkage between the MEATSUITE and the meat locker. In other words, if a person's buying meat on the MEATSUITE, they might store it at the meat locker or they might store it in a home freezer. If someone wants to rent at the meat locker, they might have found the farm in the MEATSUITE or they might not have. It's not necessary for there to be a linkage. It's just two different resources that we're offering. You can see that we have, say it's 45 users, so about 4.5 or 5 people are completely new to buying local meat. This is of users in the meat locker. We don't know the totality of sales through the MEATSUITE because we don't always hear, or we don't really hear from farms when they make a sale through the website, and attempts to survey them have not really answered the question. And then specifically, people who may have bought local meat before, like at a farmer's market and so on, 25% of all of our users are completely new to buying in bulk local meat. So that is really the central goal of this whole project, is to create more of these types of people that are buying local meat raised in bulk. And even though the 25% numerically adds up to a small number of people, we're still really pleased with the results. And, since we're still early in this project, relatively speaking, we expect great results in the long run. We have a user agreement, and because the Ithaca locker is full, we've had to make some updates. In the beginning, we had an empty freezer, and as I kept saying, a great big experiment to see if anybody would actually use us the way we intended. So in the beginning, we were renting space to farmers who needed to store excess meat for other markets, and we would rent to consumers who wanted to freeze things like fruits and vegetables or hunted game. And we are now phasing those people out because we're full and we have people who want to buy in bulk and can't get space. So our user agreement has become a little more specific recently, but in the beginning it was pretty open, just renting freezer space. I'm pleased to see that we've had to make that transition. Back in September is the last time I did a price comparison, but the average price for beef on the MEATSUITE was $4.07 a pound hanging weight. That includes all processing. And my take is that price is still a little bit low, the average price. But being an average, that means that you can still find beef on the site for lower prices than that, and of course for higher. If you use the assumption of 65% yield from carcass to retail, then that comes out to about $6.26 a pound for the meat that you bring home. And when we created a weighted average price from the average of 2 local grocery stores in Ithaca, we came up with $6.54. So there's a significant savings for the consumer when they buy beef by the quarter at the average MEATSUITE price. And I just want to point out, for those of you that are trying to do the math in your head really fast, even though the price per pound differential is small, the savings on the corner is much larger because we actually take each cut number of pounds and then the average price of grocery stores, and that's how we come up with our total when we do the math. So that explains the larger difference. And if you have questions about that, I can address them afterwards, but it's really simple to see if you look at the totals. So yeah, there's a great savings to be had comparing grocery store meat, that's coming from the Western U.S. with locally raised meat. I'm sure if you're even considering a meat locker in your area, you want to know some of the costs. And our annual rent for where the freezer sits, it's in the basement of a building in downtown Ithaca, so it's really in a great central location. And we're paying $880 a year for the footprint of the freezer. I do like that it's in an indoor location, and the ambient temperature down in that basement is pretty stable year-round. So I think that helps our electric bill. Also, our landlord is a large electric user, and so he's got a good rate from the power company, and all that results in us spending about $110 a month on electric to run the freezer, which is really great because I had estimated it would be much higher. Then we have a New York State Ag and Markets warehouse permit. We're considered a food warehouse, and for that we pay $400 a year. And then the monitoring on our alarm system is $440 a year. So if you take the costs that I've outlined here and just look what it takes for the freezer to be sitting there, to be to be turned on and running, it costs us about $253 a month. That's not including our staff time, which I mentioned is the most expensive input. But when we're full with our rental income from our users, we're getting about $255. So this is not going to be a money maker, and it's not going to be a profitable project, I think. But that was never our intent. Our intent was to take away barriers for people who wanted to buy local meat. But that said, were we to raise our rents a little bit, I think we'd have enough to cover our operational costs and begin a kitty of money to fuel any repairs that are needed on the equipment. The other thing that's missing from this picture is the cost of insurance. So we have insurance through cooperative extension, and that's going to be coming to an end in the next year, and we're going to have to come up with new ownership for the meat locker, and they're going to take on the cost of insurance. But I just wanted to outline some of our basic costs. So if you look at our whole project, we got started with a grant from the USDA's Farmers Market Promotion Program, the FMPP program. And what I'm just trying to show you on this slide is what it costs to get into this. And it was really expensive. We bought all new equipment for the freezer. So that was just over $12,000 per freezer. And again, we have two, one in Ithaca, one in Corning. But then to have electricians come in, there were some problems with bringing in new power supply, bringing in new meter, all that. And then there was also in the Ithaca location, well, actually in both locations, we also had to hire plumbers. In Ithaca, it was to create plumbing for fire suppression. We actually have to have a sprinkler head inside of our freezer, which is, is pretty funny in my mind, but it's also expensive. And then we also have plumbing to take the water from the condenser and so on out away from the equipment. Then we had to buy all the plastic containers and the shelving and, the alarm system and all that kind of stuff. And so it all adds up. And I think, to get one started from scratch with all new equipment is going to cost at least $20,000. And then we have staff support, and I put a question mark there. For our project, we have one person dedicated to all the aspects of the Finger Lakes Meat Project at 20 hours a week, plus my time, which probably amounts to about 8 hours a week. I think it could be done with a little bit less staff time. However, what's really key, we're talking about the mechanics and the equipment and the pieces here, but what's really key to the Finger Lakes Meat Project is reaching out to the public, letting them know that the MEATSUITE exists, letting them know that the meat locker exists, educating them about the opportunity in local meat and bulk buying. And for that we have a Facebook page and all these events, and that's where the staff time is really critical. All right, so I see that there's a few questions, and I've put up my contact information. You can feel free to contact me with questions. Running on the assumption that some people on this webinar would like to see something like this start up in their region. Right now, I'm doing an expansion of the MEATSUITE into 16 additional counties up from our first 11 counties in the beginning. And again, the message that I just had, the emphasis is not really on the mechanics of the project or the management of the freezer or of the website. The emphasis is on the outreach to the consumer. So, at the Finger Lakes Meat Project, we're doing extensive social media, reaching out to the press, holding special events, holding free classes to educate the consumer about all the reasons that they, should be considering buying in bulk, buying local meat, and then letting them know about the resources that are available. And that is really key. When we started the freezer in Corning, that was also our focus is, now that freezer is there and the website is there, but we really need to reach the community and get our message across, and that is time intensive. So that's why we have a dedicated person at 20 hours a week, and arguably it could take even more. So were there a few questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple questions here, Matt. So, and I put them into the chat box just so you can see them as well.
Okay,
the first one,
yep.
Yeah, so how do you guys inventory? Are you on paper or are you using a spreadsheet on the computer?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I would love to have something like an iPad to do it right on the spot, but we still carry paper and binders. So, and this kind of gets to the next question as well. When people want to bring me in to drop off, we make them schedule an appointment, and we prefer to have that happen outside of our 3 hours that we're open, although it certainly can happen during, and I'll explain why. But let's say they're bringing in a quarter of a beef. That's the product that I'm most accustomed to talking about. It'll take us about 20 minutes to check it in. So there's a few intake forms, there's a user agreement, and there's a little survey about where did you buy it and what did you pay and all that. But then we literally take each piece of meat, write it down, and we have our own materials, where we list the cut and the weight and so on, and then we throw it on a little scale, we weigh it, and then we throw it in the bin. So we literally go cut by cut. It's not necessary to get the weights. As I said earlier, that's our data-driven minds. We just really want to know the kind of weights that people are getting from their farms. But it is necessary to list each cut individually, and then we have the person initial in a box that says they've dropped that meat off. When they come to pick meat up, we just do it by the cut, and we don't bother weighing it. So if they checked in 4 ribeye steaks and we had all the weights and we had them sign for it, they come back, they want to take out 1 package of ribeye steaks, we just make them sign for any pack. We don't worry about the specific weight of it. I hope that answers the inventory. So we keep that all on paper. Right when they check in, we take the inventory sheet back to the office, photocopy it, and we mail the person a copy so they can be keeping track at home and they know what's left in the freezer. There are those that bring their sheets with them all the time. They know just what they're going to be getting out because they know what's left in there. I would love to see that all move itself online, but we don't have the resources to create that right now.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Do you have, so aside from home users, do you have any restaurants using this?
We do. We have a few food businesses, I'd say, that are using it. And one of our earliest users was a B&B, a bed and breakfast. And they had same story as the consumers. They have been buying locally raised meat by the cut and by the package at things like farmers markets and farm stores to supply their B&B, with the meals. And once we opened, they started buying whole hogs in particular, but also bulk quantities of beef from the very same farms. And then they're renting containers from us. And I just remember now that someone asked earlier how many containers. Yeah, the average consumer just rents 1, but we do have some customers that are renting 2 containers, and that is our limit. It's a part of our revision is that there's a 2-container limit for people.
Mm-hmm. And I think you had that in your slides that there's like 40-some people and 65 containers.
Right. So you can do the math there. So we have also had a few other like caterers and a woman, in the early days, a woman who makes popsicles was keeping fruit with us and a few other restaurants. But the bed and breakfast is our main person who's been with us the longest and continues to buy whole hogs.
Mm-hmm. And I think you touched on this, so there's a question about does the locker have to be health department inspected? You mentioned you're a New York State food storage facility. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So it's really great to be a food warehouse, and that's what we are in New York State. I don't remember. It's like a 28D licensed food warehouse. So what you you have to realize when you're running a freezer like this is that you do not ever own any meat. Therefore, you wouldn't get involved with your health department. You don't get involved with USDA. You don't get involved with the state ag department. Well, except for your warehouse permit. But we don't own meat. We don't sell meat. We don't touch meat. We don't process meat. All our meat has to arrive to us already frozen. That's in our user agreement. And we have told people that they have to come back another day when they bring us meat that's not completely frozen. What's nice is that every processor that I know of will freeze the meat for the consumer, so they get it. They get it from their farmer or their processor already frozen. They bring it to us and we store it. Here in New York State, our inspector inspects us once a year, and he has told us that he considers the individual containers to be private property, just like those storage units that you can rent. So he said in order for someone from the state to go inside somebody else's storage unit, they would need a warrant. And, of course, it hasn't come to that with us. New York State Ag and Markets just sees us as a food warehouse. They inspect our freezer. They don't look inside the containers, and it's really not a rigorous process.
That's great.
Matt,
that makes this permitting easy.
Yes. This is Lauren, Matt. This has been a long project for you, and I'm wondering if, reflecting back on it, if there are some things you can tell us. I mean, some of this came up in your presentation, but if there are things you can tell us about, when is your area ripe for a project like this? What kinds of things need to be in place on the ground? Yeah.
Money. Grant money. When we started, it has been a long process. We started the MEATSUITE in 2012, and before that we were doing surveys of consumers and so on. I always hoped that we'd find out that this is replicable. I mean, we did it to grow local meat in our region, but looking all across New York State, and for that matter, the country, we were hoping that this would be a way to facilitate local meat sales all over the place. We started the meat locker here in Ithaca, and it was a great big experiment. I mean, when we had the freezer done and we claimed that it was open to the public, there was a lot of nervous anticipation. Will people actually use it? In the beginning, like I said, we would take anybody who wanted to rent space in a freezer, even if it was for fruits and vegetables. We took them. Pleased to say that, within the first 9 months we were open, we were full, and that's when we updated our user agreement and started phasing out the people who weren't on mission, meaning people who bought local meat in bulk from a local farm. We got our funding from the FMPP, and they approved our project, but they cut our budget by about $15,000, which is common. So it left us short on cash right out of the gate. And you really, you need adequate funds. I don't think overall it's a super expensive project, but you do need adequate funds to get it started. I would never try to get those funds from farmers. I would try to get them from grant sources, like the Farmers Market Promotion Program and perhaps even the value-added producer grants, because this is a multi-farm marketing effort. There are other resources to go to. And when people ask the question about is it right for my community, we launched it in Ithaca, and if those of you listening know about Ithaca, it has a certain reputation for local foods, and that's why we planned the Corning location, is we wanted to try it in another community so that if it worked in Ithaca, people wouldn't conclude, yeah, but that's Ithaca. We wanted to see if it worked somewhere else, and it's too early to say because our Corning locker just opened 2 months ago. But I will say, go back to those numbers. We have about 45 people renting from us. And so any community where you think you could find 45 people interested in buying local meat in bulk, then I think you're probably viable in that community.
Well, and I bet processors love it because then they're not sitting there waiting for people to pick their meat up.
Yeah, and we hope that the producers love it too, and we hear that they do. So I shouldn't say we do.
Absolutely. Oh, well, I thought that would go without saying.
Yeah, a market, I didn't go too far down the road about access to USDA-inspected processing, which is always a hot topic here in New York State. And, I got 2 emails today about people proposing to build new plants in the state. But what I say to producers who need access to processing to reach their markets is that here's a market channel which is really, ripe for the taking. It's underdeveloped right now in our region. That's why we're working on growing it, and it's not reliant on USDA inspected. So there are many custom cutters in the region that can handle these farms that are, some of these custom guys don't really have enough business. So it's a great way to take your focus off the necessity for USDA and open up a whole new market that doesn't need that.
Yeah, and it's also, those farmers who are selling by the whole half and quarter, boy, they're not having the same trouble with inventory management.
Right.
One of the questions that came up, technical question, are the containers locked?
The large size bin has room for a padlock, and so our renters are welcome to add a padlock if they want to. No one has ever taken us up on that. But again, you have to remember the freezer is only accessed by our staff, and it is otherwise padlocked and alarmed. So we don't have customers going inside the freezer where everybody else's stuff is. It's just our staff.
Got it. So Catherine has posted, again, the link to the survey. If you scroll through your chat box, everyone, you can find it. If you are interested, even vaguely interested in starting this where you are, let us know. As I said at the beginning, Matt's not going to send you a set of blueprints and a whole, here's the whole set of things you have to do. What we're talking about is how can we figure out what kind of support different folks need and give them this kind of guidance as Matt's working it out too. We're planning on putting together basically a, guide to doing this with a lot of sort of pre-work about are we ready for it. I wondered with, I don't see any other specific questions about MEATSUITE or the meat lockers coming in at this moment. You mentioned earlier, Matt, your pricing spreadsheets. I wonder if you could just take a minute and tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, yeah. I have new funding from the New York Farm Viability Institute here in New York State to develop, I have a programmed Excel spreadsheet that I've been using with farms for over 5 years now to help them develop the pricing when they're selling meat specific for the channel that they're selling it in, and come up with pricing per pound for each cut that they sell. Of course, I do advocate for selling things in quarters and halves, but farms are still going to be in things like farmers markets and restaurant sales. So the Excel spreadsheet helps them develop the pricing for each individual cut and with a focus on accounting for all of the costs and still delivering a profit. My new funding from Farm Viability is going to enable me to take that Excel spreadsheet and turn it into an easy-to-use web form, and that's already under development, and I hope it'll be out in maybe January or February of 2016.
That's great, Matt. That's going to be a huge asset. And for those of you who don't know, we have that. We have the existing pricing spreadsheets on our site, which are useful in this whole conversation. Matt, if you could click to the last slide, just so folks, as we wrap up here, know where to go for the survey and also to our website. I really want to thank Matt for spending his time with us today on this project, and I've been following it close to from the beginning, and I've been really impressed with how he's pulled it together. So thanks very much, Matt, for that, and as always for your participation in MPAN. And thank you, audience, for coming and joining us today. This webinar has been recorded. It will be posted to our website, and we will send information out to our listserv. If you aren't on our listserv, you can email us and we will add you, or you can just go to our website and there is a little box where you can sign up for the listserv right there on that homepage. So with that, thank you very much, Catherine, for all of your help with this, and I think we will call it a wrap.
Thanks.